All right, we'll get started here pretty much on time. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Lozen connector for Micro Focus Enterprise Server. This is the final webinar in our series for December. We have a couple others you can go back and watch on YouTube or on our website, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. I am Dustin Froyum, co-founder and CFO of VirtualZ Computing. And once again, I am pleased to have our chief architect, Richard Philyaw, here to present with me. Also, thank you to Elsa Flores, our director of marketing, for quarterbacking us today. Also on with us is Vince Ray, our co-founder and CTO, and senior software engineers, Greg Miller and Naga Sagal, and they'll all be available for questions at the end of the presentation, and you can place questions in the chat window as we go. And also this webinar is being recorded and will be available for playback as well. So let's move on and review our short agenda, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. We'll start with a very brief introduction to Lozen and the problem we're solving. And then Richard will speak to the connector environment briefly, with a focus, of course, on the Micro Focus connector to their enterprise server product. We'll see a short demo of Lozen operating with a COBOL program against running in the distributed environment and connecting back to our mainframe. We'll review a few of the Lozen benefits and cost savings opportunities, and then we'll finish up with a live Q&A. And Elsa will open mics for that portion as well if we don't have any chat questions. So let's start with the problem we're solving. Today, there's a chasm between the mainframe data and the rest of the compute world. And so many customers have solved this with a variety of approaches out of necessity in order to expose this valuable business data with other environments, such as data lakes, analytics platforms, customer off-the-shelf cloud and distributed applications. In the case with a compiled or refactored application running in a distributed environment, you have to address the data porting and potentially the challenge of change data capture. And so we really think we have a better method, and that's why we've come to market with Lozen here in 2022, so that we can really bring these compute environments together in a seamless manner, completely eliminating the need for costly ETL and CDC solutions. Today, we're going to show you the powerful combination of Lozen and the Micro Focus Enterprise Server, so you can rapidly achieve modernization goals while reducing risk of having to deal with that data and reducing costs in the process as well by eliminating these, again, these ETL and change data capture and other legacy techniques. Now I'm going to turn it over to Richard to talk a little bit about our connectors and also to introduce the demo.
Thanks, Dusty, and thanks everyone for being with us this morning. So in addition to the base functionality shipped with Lozen, we provide additional interface components to allow convenient access through a variety of interface styles to a wide set of consumers. Simply stated, Lozen leverages NSF to mount IBM Z VSAM and sequential files in the local file system of your Linux and Windows servers and desktops. All applications and processes running on those systems will access those files with standard file open, read, write, close commands. Using this can be as simple as a command line copy or an application file open to read the file. In addition to our native NFS and Micro Focus connectors, which we'll talk about more in a moment, we also provide Open API and MuleSoft integrations, allowing Lozen customers to have simple and secure access to mainframe data from an increasing number of application environments. Open API is an open set of standards published by a consortium focused on the value of standardizing software APIs. Open API makes it easy to weave together services from a diverse range of providers into sophisticated composite applications. Many commercial and open source applications support the Open API specification. In addition to a wide range of open source tools, Vendors such as Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, TIBCO, Software AG, and many others embrace Open API in their commercial products. This means that applications running within any of these contexts can use Lozen to read and update mainframe files by interacting with simple and familiar Open API objects without special customized coding. MuleSoft is one of the most popular integration platforms available with thousands of customers worldwide. While Mule can leverage the Lozen API capabilities we just described, we also provide a specific connector for MuleSoft. In addition to all of these environments, we have a standalone API that can be used to simplify accessing mainframe data via a C or C++ based DLL format on Windows systems, and a Java-friendly version of the API that's shipped as a simple jar file that can run on any system that has a Java virtual machine. Now let's take a look at the Micro Focus connector in a little more detail. There's a lot of use cases for using Lozen, but I would say the main use case for the Lozen integration for Micro Focus Enterprise Server is to allow IBM Z COBOL workloads to be moved to Windows and Linux distributed and cloud platforms while still maintaining access to IBM Z data, such as VSAM, without any modifications to the application code. This is achieved by simply recompiling the COBOL source using the Micro Focus COBOL compiler and installing the Lozen connector from Micro Focus on the server that will run the newly compiled programs. To achieve this use case, VirtualZ has implemented the Micro Focus callable file handler interface. This integration handles all the standard COBOL file organizations, sequential, line sequential, relative, and indexed. And the file operations supported by this integration fit into the categories of opening and closing files, reading records, writing records, positioning by key for a browse operation, and deleting records. In short, all the standard COBOL file access and I/O syntax is supported, so programs do not have to change at all. The installation and configuration process for the Lozen and Micro Focus integration is straightforward. The platform requirements are 64-bit Windows, as well as most popular 64-bit Linux distributions. For the Micro Focus side, we require Micro Focus Enterprise Server 6.0 and above, or Micro Focus Visual COBOL 6.0 and above. The integration also comes with a UI-based installer with a configuration screen to capture the Lozen server, host, port, and data path. Once the installation is complete, you'll find 2 text config files in the install folder. These files can be edited with any text editor. One config file is used by the Micro Focus callable file handler interface to specify the file patterns for the files that need to be accessed through Lozen. By simply stating these simple file patterns in that config file, the Micro Focus runtime will automatically invoke Lozen when it encounters a file access on any file matching that pattern in a COBOL program. The other file contains the URL for the Lozen server, along with additional configuration related to authentication and performance. You can also set 4 environment variables, either manually by script or through the Micro Focus Enterprise Server admin UI, to allow the Micro Focus runtime to locate the Lozen library and config files. A couple of final notes before we move on to our demo video. We also support standard COBOL file and record locking modes to allow data sharing and protection for the ZOS datasets we access through Lozen. Finally, I want to emphasize that we always leverage IBM Z native security facilities, including RACF, Top Secret, and ACF2. The Lozen connector will authenticate to the Lozen server, and authorization will be respected as configured on IBM Z. We can also support open security standards such as Kerberos. Now, let's show a short demo video explaining a little more about our integration and showing it in action. This short demonstration will show how to use the Lozen connector for Micro Focus to access VSAM data on IBM Z from your distributed COBOL programs. The File Handler API was implemented and published by Micro Focus to allow custom file handling by COBOL programs using standard COBOL file I/O syntax. Using the callable file handler, an external library can service file I/O requests without any modification to your COBOL program. By implementing the File Handler API, we can leverage Lozen to directly access VSAM data residing on IBM Z from COBOL programs running on Linux and Windows. Let's look at the Micro Focus Enterprise Server Administration UI on our Windows server. Here we can see in the Micro Focus ES file catalog a list of the VSAM files we have linked to our IBM Z mainframe. We have defined an application in Micro Focus ES called Bank Demo. This application will be used to prepare a bank customer account statement that includes all the customer accounts plus transactions for the current month. Using the admin UI, we can see the various configuration and runtime options for the application. This includes startup parameters such as where to write log files, how much shared memory to allocate, whether to show the console, and other options. Now let's take a look at one of the COBOL programs we will use for this application. We can see that we are specifying an account information file which can be read sequentially through its base index. We also will access a customer information file and an account transaction file, both of which will be open for random access. The account info file can be read for either the entire file or for just a specific customer. As we process the three different files, we read the data for all the customer account types, including the transactions for the current period. This data will be written to an extract file that is then input to a sort job step. The sorted output from the sort is then processed by a print step to format the transaction report. Let's return to the ES Admin UI to take a look at our job start options. Since we are using JES emulation to initiate the job, we can input a JCL file for the job here. We can also connect printers and start initiators before we submit the job. As we click Submit, we see the job starting in the console log. We click View Job to see the details of the submitted, now running job. Looking at the log messages, we notice that an exec parm of B0004 has been passed to the job. This tells our program to read only the records for that specific customer. As the job completes, we can check the messages showing which records were read from the files accessed by the program with record counts. We also see that the extract file was successfully created so it can be opened by the sort job step. Scrolling down to the list of DD entries, we can view the print output file to see the formatted account transaction statement. Using the power of Lozen, coupled with the Micro Focus Enterprise Server, COBOL compiler, and the callable File Handler API, we can move our mainframe COBOL programs and JCL to distributed and cloud platforms without changing the COBOL source in any way. By leaving the data on the mainframe, we can remove the risk and expense of copying the data while also avoiding the cost and operational complexity of keeping that data in sync across platforms. Thank you for your time and attention. For further information, please contact us via email, phone, or social media.
All right, great. Let's review some of the benefits here, and some of these will be a little bit of repeat and summary, but I just wanted to kind of summarize them all for everybody. So as Richard covered in our connector portfolio, our goal is really to make the data access completely no code. We don't want the customers to have to create one API or a single line of code for the data access, which obviously drastically reduces the cost of maintenance and making this really frictionless to our DevOps processes of the customers. Richard really covered some of the key benefits of the Micro Focus integration, but again, you can recompile that COBOL or PL1 code, run it in the Micro Focus Enterprise Server distributed environment, connect to your data with Lozen and the Micro Focus connector with no changes to the data access semantics or syntax. And so it really makes it look and behave like a native mainframe application from that respect. Honoring the security, as Richard said, and it just is, it's really a nice way to get a quick time to value or ROI on your modernization projects. So in addition to accessing the data as you need it, all this is zip enabled as well. So we're reducing the amount of data over the wire. And we see customers having 5 to up to 40% of their MIPS and capacity used for these legacy ETL methods. So while we're reducing that data over the wire, even the data that remains is going to be 90% plus dispatched to the zip engine if you so wish. Doesn't require a zip engine, but can run under JVM on your general processor, but makes it very cost effective in that respect, and really a massive savings potential. Lozen also includes automated bidirectional data transformation. Again, the work moves to the zip engine if you want it there, or we also have options to do the data transformation on the cloud or the distributed side as well. So again, another savings opportunity and simplifying your process with a single solution with Lozen. And then we've already covered the mainframe native security and cryptography. Again, that's an important aspect to mainframe customers that want to maintain that data. We see this really important in discussions with our EMEA customers in particular because of GDPR issues, et cetera. But that's a desire all the way around, right? To have to maintain your security of that data that you kind of lose control of in some of those ETL and legacy scenarios. And then we really want to have simple, transparent, and frictionless pricing that really self-funds. So we see most customers with a connector, they're going to average about $200,000 per year in costs with Lozen. And so it can be a very, very cost-effective solution and really large savings possibility with the zip enablement, the less data over the wire, and then gaining some of the processing capabilities on the cloud and distributed side for applications that you want to develop or migrate off the mainframe for that purpose. Okay, so let's open it up for Q&A. Elsa, if you'll open up the microphones, we'll be glad to take some questions.
Okay, mics have been enabled, but if anyone wants to speak, you'll have to unmute yourself individually.
So I'll just state one. So I know one question that comes up is Lozen specific to any particular operating system or platform, along with Micro Focus? What platforms are the possibility here? Vince, would you speak to that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the demo showcased more of a Windows look and feel, but if you're using Micro Focus on Linux platforms, it works identically. All of the same capabilities that we're talking about here would be available to you there. So all of the popular Windows and Linux platforms are supported, and certainly if you're running some unusual platform, we'd love to hear from you and love to have a discussion about what the requirements would be there.
Mahesh, I see you. Thanks, Vince. Mahesh, I see you have maybe a question but can't unmute. Is it a simple enough question to type in the chat, or Elsa, can you enable Mahesh's microphone?
His mic is enabled. Just have to unmute.
Looks like he's having a problem. Okay.
Hey, Dustin, Vishnu here. So I have one question.
Sure.
You have any future plans to extend this to DB2 as well? DB2 on ZOS?
Yeah, I'll maybe give the very high level answer, and then Vince, you can weigh in a little bit further. So while our technology and our framework has the ability to support it, there are solutions on the market, right, that come right with DB2, like the OBDC drivers and JDBC drivers. So it wasn't really our initial focus to look at DB2, because we're really solving some of the more challenging data types of, VSAM, QSAM, PDS, etc. Vince, anything else you would add?
Yeah, no, that's a good summary. I think if you look at the DB2 space, it's pretty crowded. There are a lot of remote access to DB2 data, and it's more than the paradigm we're talking about here is open, close, read, write. So it's pretty universal. In the case of a database like DB2, the client won't be talking open, close, read, write. It would be talking SQL essentially. So we just felt that between that being a crowded space and the fact that there just aren't, as Dusty said, there just aren't that many solutions for traditional mainframe data sources, that would be a better place to start. But I also want to underscore one other thing that Dusty pointed out. The server side of Lozen is basically a plug-in architecture. So if there is a different type of data that we need to connect to, and and maybe it's not DB2, maybe it's, I don't know, Database or some other proprietary format like that. Certainly we have the ability to extend Lozen to support whatever our customers need.
And then I'll see if I can interpret this question. And Mahesh, is your mic still locked? And you're typing the chat? I think so. So this is regarding performance, concurrency with Micro Focus and the mainframe processes. So I assume like file locking, record level sharing, because of there's a CICS component to that question as well. Is that right, Mahesh? Yeah. You can give me a thumbs up and Vince, maybe you can speak to that as well.
I could unmute now.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent.
Basically, yeah, it is about, for example, if you're sharing, right, especially VSAM or any other files between a mainframe process and a Micro Focus process, somebody need to coordinate the access. Otherwise, you could get a data corruption, or whether it's a batch or online, or doesn't matter, right? So or is the solution that it's either or means if it is allocated to Micro Focus, we need to coordinate the access from outside via scheduling or any other mechanisms, right? Or what is the solution typically, right? Otherwise, you could have an issue with the, unless you manage the concurrency and locking at the file level or record level or whatever.
So thanks for that question. That's a great question. And the way to think of it is that the behavior you get is exactly the same as if the Micro Focus application were running natively on ZOS. So really what that means is it depends on how you've defined your VSAM files and so forth. At one end of the scale, if you have I'll call it legacy VSAM and nothing more than share options and so forth, that's the behavior you're going to get. So you can have everything from serialized access. In other words, one application gets to open the file at a time. If two applications try to access it at the same time, one gets access, the other doesn't. You can have concurrent access if you choose to. And kind of moving up from there, if you've got, let's say VSAM RLS, record level sharing, then you get all of the benefits of that technology. And generally what that's going to provide is that you might have a VSAM file that's allocated to CICS region being updated by CICS transactions, but you're running other applications outside of CICS. In our case, absolutely you can achieve integrity that way. And then even a step beyond that, if you're using TVS or transactional VSAM, then you also get commit processing and rollback capabilities and all of that transactional behavior that you would expect. But really, it just comes down to how have you defined the VSAM files that are involved, and based on that, the functionality you get would be the same as what you'd expect from your application running natively on ZOS, even though it's accessing that file from the cloud or some other platforms. Same is true, by the way, across multiple instances of the application. You may not even have a Kix environment, as I'm describing. You may have Micro Focus applications running on multiple servers. So again, the same behavior you would get is if those applications were all running on ZOS, and you largely control that based on how you define the VSAM files.
So all your security, transactionality, etc., you're managing just like any other mainframe application. And I'm assuming then Micro Focus will be running in episodic mode, because the data is still in episodic on the mainframe in this case, because Micro Focus Enterprise Server, right? So episodic character set as opposed to ASCII. Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. I mean, you mentioned security. Certainly, just like integrity, you get the same security you would get on any mainframe application. In other words, your mainframe security product and all of its policies are used when we access the let's say a VSAM file, just as if your application were running locally. So you'd get all the same security checks, you'd be able to use all the same security policies. If you have existing security policies protecting your data, they would continue to protect the data even though it's being accessed remotely. This is a really key point for most mainframe customers because they like the idea that they don't lose control over the data. It's not like you're relying on someone on, I don't know, Linux or Windows or any other platform to implement security. They can certainly have their own layer of security, but at the core, you're going to get what I think of as standard ZOS protection for all of the accesses to those underlying data sets.
And also,
the other
is it only integrated with Micro Focus external file handler at this point, or this is also used as a general purpose VSAM connector for for opening up the VSAM to any other, like SQL access to VSAM, like data virtualization, or there are products like that, right? VSAM connectors. So you have other mechanisms to use this Lozen product to access the VSAM from non-mainframe platforms. Micro Focus is one of the ways to use it, or it's only.
Hey, Elsa, let's go back to the connector slide while we're talking about this answer.
I joined later. I think I'll go through the slides later. Yeah.
Yeah, that's no problem. But Vince, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought this would help our illustration of.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the quick answer here is that there's one Lozen server running on your mainframe, and it can talk to a variety of different clients. At the simplest end, we can speak nothing more than the NFS protocol. So if I've got, I don't know, a Linux system, or really just about any computer out there that has an NFS client built into it, I can point to my mainframe, I can mount my data, and now I'm accessing mainframe files as though they were, local file system objects. The application running on that type of client would just see the files as, in the directory as though they were local files, and it's free to use normal operating system things, open, close, read, write, to access those files. So that means just about any application can access mainframe data through that NFS layer. It's very standardized. It's pretty much universally supported. You know, I'm not aware of too many platforms that don't have some sort of NFS connectivity. To make it a little bit easier to integrate, I mean, we've been talking about microfocus in this session. So, you know, the way you could think of it is that, you know, we've developed a connector that speaks the microfocus callable file handler protocol on one end and talks to our NFS capability on the other end. The advantage of that, as you know, Richard pointed out in his presentation, is that provides for, you know, truly seamless operation. You know, if your application is doing you know, search for a record by its key, you don't have to know how to express that as an NFS request. All you have to do is do what you're normally doing in COBOL, and you know, we handle that in the connector that we provide for Microsoft. It doesn't end there, though. You know, as Richard also mentioned, we've also built implementations around the Open API standard, and you know, there are dozens of products that are capable of doing remote access to data by making Open API calls. We can plug directly into those, and then all of those same capabilities are available to you there. You know, if you're using, you know, just to have one to talk about, if you're using Microsoft Logic apps, you know, it knows how to consume an Open API endpoint, and you know, that can be, you know, in turn talking to Lozen. So now all of a sudden, with you know, as Dustin said, zero code, you can you know, integrate mainframe data into, you know, Logic apps flows, and it's not just whole files. It's you know, almost think of it as API functions. You read a record by its key or by its record number, or delete a particular record out of a VSAM file, and you know, so on and so on and so on. So we've done several of these now, in addition to Microfocus and the Open API work I've talked about. There's one that's custom to MuleSoft. And then if you are writing kind of at a lower level, if you're just looking to develop a Java program or even a, you know, C and C++ program, we also provide API libraries that, you know, really streamline what you need to do. And again, you don't need to know anything about NFS in that case. All you need to do is know, you know, I want to go look up a record by its key, or whatever the higher level function you're looking to invoke. So all of that, you know, our idea is that we want to make that mainframe data that we support as accessible as possible to as wide a range of development environments as exist out there. So again, this is what we've done so far. I wouldn't think of this as a finished list. I would think of it as kind of our initial installments on trying to make mainframe data easy to integrate in other places. And you know, I would certainly expect more to come. The other thing I really just want to quickly touch on, kind of glossed over it before, but data transformation and EBCDIC and ASCII and all of that was mentioned. Yep. You know, a core capability of Lozen is indeed a data transformation engine. So in the case of Microfocus, as you correctly pointed out, they have the ability to consume and process EBCDIC data, so there's not really a huge amount of need for that. But in other environments, that's not the case. You know, only part of the problem is connecting and reading and writing the data. Sometimes understanding how that data is formatted is an equally big problem. So, you know, we give you a way to generate a little bit of metadata for a mainframe application, or, you know, a file. And based on that metadata, we can automatically transform you know, record content to whatever the application on the client end wants to see. So an example of that, I might have a VSAM file with, you know, maybe it's some character data in EBCDIC, maybe it's some packed decimal, maybe it's a mainframe style floating point, you know, all of these different things are probably intermingled in a lot of VSAM files. You know, I might want to transfer that to, you know, let's say, I don't know, JSON format or an XML format or a CSV format, because the application that I'm dealing with on the client side knows how to process data in those kind of structures. So yeah, absolutely, Lozen is able to do that. And to go one step further, you know, with a lot of these data transformation solutions, you know, the trick is knowing the layout of your file. You know, well, we certainly allow you to build that metadata by hand. We can also do things like take a COBOL copybook that describes the record and allow you to generate the metadata that's needed based on that. So, you know, all of your existing COBOL copybooks and so on can be used to generate that metadata, and then it's really just a matter of how do I want to see it in my application. So, yeah, important point. And thanks for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. The transformation is key. I mean, as you rightly said, in the Micro Focus world, it's already knows about COBOL and FCDIC, so it's not a big deal. But other consumers will need capability of transformation and interpreting the COBOL layouts and, you know, comp data types, etc.
Okay. Any other questions before we close here? I know we're a little over, but I certainly don't want to cut off any other questions if there are some.
So probably the next natural extension is the other non-RDBMS databases like IMS, maybe IMS-DB, because DB2, I think, as you already mentioned, it already has enough SQL connectors, JDBC, DB2 Connect, etc. But yeah, non-RDBMS sources like, I don't know, AWS and IMS-DB, etc. But currently you're focusing on VSAM and QSAM and PDS, right?
Yeah, I'll answer a little bit, and then Vince, maybe you can weigh in as well again. So we have some requests out there to look at some other database and data types, and you know, the infrastructure of Lozen can accommodate those, but you know, we would have to make sure we have the right requests and right inertia in the market to do that. Some of those are, you know, especially IMS, right? Those can be very challenging. Vince, you want anything else you'd want to comment on?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good summary. We'd love to you know, have a customer come to us with you know, requirements in those areas where, you know, as I said before, we're able to do it. It's really you know, we just want to understand those requirements, and you know, as Dusty says, make sure that we have you know, clear use case and solution in mind.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Glad to take them. So. Okay. I'll just say, oh, was there something else?
No, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll just say there are a couple other webinars in this series. One is kind of a different flavor on how you can use Lozen to supplement legacy ETL processes, or even like populating data lakes in a very cost-effective manner. There's one that is focused on the MuleSoft connector, and then we have some more planned in the new year. Also, if you'd like a more detailed one-on-one briefing and about some of the other use cases for Lozen, or our other product coming to market, ZAC, which is the inverse Z as a client, so the ability for the mainframe to consume data and to connect to other low-cost storage environments, would be glad to do that. And then otherwise, we'll say happy holidays, happy new year. Hope you'll join us for our next series.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.